Testing. Is this thing working at all? Looks like yes. Okay. Let's go ahead and cut this off here. You gotta love it when your mic acts up. Really, since the end of last year, it's been doing that. I'll turn on the camera, of course. Jeez, my hat's all out of sorts. Heck of a start to stream. Hope everyone's doing well. Interesting situation starting to take shape. Hi Mia, how you doing? But well, I tell you. Oh wait, no, it does have the 3-day map. Okay, cool. That's a new. I just learned something new today. Glad to hear it. So, obviously, got to address the elephant in this room. And we have the potential for the weather to do an interesting thing this week. So, now, obviously, we were looking on weather-wise before the stream had started. There is some impressive snowfall that's ongoing right now, especially over towards the Great Lakes. And there's even heavy snow expected, of course, as you can see here on the screen, over towards Lake Erie and areas off to the east here. This is not going to be the system that we're focusing on, though. If we go to tomorrow, you can see that things start to get a little bit more interesting with this system right here. We start to see rainfall over towards the deep south on Friday, and then by the time we get into Saturday, watch what happens here. We end up seeing this in the blue right here, which is mixed precipitation along with a thunderstorm threat. Now, I'm not expecting any severe weather, neither is the Storm Prediction Center, otherwise we would have made note of it. But what I'm paying attention to is how the cold air ends up interacting with two things. The moisture that's going to be out ahead of it, A, and then there's a surface low that's going to be over here towards the Gulf that's going to be progressing its way inland over the next day or two, obviously. But its track is going to be the key component to everything. And also the strength of this low will be a big factor to go along with that. The stronger the low pressure, the more warm air gets injected into this circulation here. And ultimately, we'll see that cold air retreat to the north more. But if it stays weaker, we have more cold air to invade maybe the core of it. And then also, the amount of moisture available is going to be a huge factor, as this will eventually look to trend its way up and over the east coast here. Now, with the recent thinking, at least up until probably this afternoon, we're expecting a bit of a northwestern trend, maybe, but I think we're starting to see a little bit of pushback on that as of the latest model data I've found. So we could be looking at a situation where it goes this way. Now, I'm sure what some of you might be thinking is, okay, what's the big deal? If you want snow, you would want to be under the surface low. Not exactly. So this shifts north, the snow threat trends further toward the north, and then the rain threat also trends further to the north. So these areas in South Georgia, and that's the main reason why this is a big deal, they're kind of in the bullseye right now. This shifts off to the northwest. This goes closer towards my city, for example, in Atlanta, and this becomes more of a more significant storm for the interior, mid-Atlantic, and eastern coastline, I would say. This trends further out like this. Yes, the deep south has a better chance at snow, but then this becomes less of an impact for the east coast, especially over towards the Delmarva and parts of the northeast. The best way to really show you is by actually taking a look at the weather models here, because this is kind of what we're dealing with right now. So in our current situation, you'll see the energy kind of manifesting here with our low pressure, with our surface map here. We're looking at our precip and our pressure, and I can't get my words out today, brain's not working, but you'll see this energy kind of forming here. You take a look here where the surface low is. This is just an example I'm pointing out. This is not the surface low that's going to be causing the trouble here. It starts to form up here. The center is a little bit hard to hammer down exactly where it will end up being, along with the timing of this storm. It seems like it will be somewhere around here. And there's like a lot of there's a little bit of a moisture tail behind it, and I think that's really where we get the potential for maybe a little bit of that southern snow. But the thing with this is also is that whenever we start to get these big pushes, or maybe you would call them pulls from the north with the cold air, is that the air tends to get drier the colder it gets. So in a way, theoretically, it's like a paradox whenever you get snow. You have to kind of be in the Goldilocks zone. And that's kind of what we end up seeing here. But one thing that I have noticed in comparison to yesterday's model runs is the fact that we aren't seeing as big a return on snow because of the fact that, like I said, it looks like that low pressure does strengthen just a little bit. Like I said, I do think that warm air does kind of creep in. There's also a high pressure that kind of lags a little bit further back, makes this a little bit more positive tilt as well, so that cold air lags more. Because a lot of times what will end up happening is moisture will end up outrunning the cold, and it looks like the GFS of this as of this latest run is kind of going with that scenario as of right now. When I was looking at model data yesterday, I saw that the euro was kind of hot on that scenario, and I think the GFS is kind of creeping on board with it. So it makes for an interesting variable for the deep south, but interior northeast and the mid-Atlantic could be a point of interest. With this low kind of being on the weaker side, this actually bodes better for you if you don't want to see snow here. You'll see some, but the totals won't be as significant as, let's say, what they were yesterday, because the dinner time models around this time yesterday, holy cow. But you can see this continuing to push off, and this does just enough to where this would keep the eastern half of the U.S. here, the East Coast particularly, relevant with the winter weather threat. It's not going to be a long-lasting threat. It's going to be brief periods of snow, and then we're going to see this just exit out like nothing even happened from there. Now, here's the thing. Yesterday, the euro wasn't really in agreement entirely with the GFS. We're seeing a little bit better agreement, but whereas the GFS is kind of downtrending on the snow, even though we're a little bit further off towards the south with the euro, there's a little bit more of a snow shield than it was on the GFS. Now, again, the track of the low is a lot further out to sea, so in turn, look what ends up happening towards the East Coast. You don't really get much of anything. So again, it's kind of the tale of really multiple models. Now, if we were to go ahead and take a look at the icon model here, I don't use this model as much due to the fact that the range is a little bit more limited with this. As you can see, we only have 120 hours available, whereas even with the lower end Euro runs, we still get 144. So 5 versus 6 days actually is a huge difference. But if we were to go ahead and take a look at this, you'll see that not really much of a snow shield is present. Kind of takes more of the look of what the Euro is showing us. And really no one gets much of anything. The icon just kind of says, forget it. I'm 86ing everybody when it comes to snow. And then onward we move from there. Cold air kind of settles in for a couple of days, and we're kind of right back on the wagon once again with the fluctuation temperatures. So at this point also, and this is where things really get difficult, is the fact that we're still kind of far from being within complete convective model range. There's really only one that's available, and I don't actually like using convective models for winter runs because they kind of end up being all over the place. But considering that we have the data, we may as well use it, and I still think we're just a little bit too far out of range. I think we'll be within range by tomorrow. So this goes up to about 60 hours out. This is the NAM 3 kilometer, and from what I can see, we're just barely at the edge of its range when this system starts to look like it takes shape here. I think the low ends up being a little bit closer to shore, I would say at this point, maybe over towards the Big Bend in Florida. And if that ends up being the case, or maybe if it's even going over Georgia, this may result in maybe a little bit snow further off towards the north if moisture can meet up with the cold air. But like I said, there's so many moving parts with this system. Like I said, the strength of the low pressure could work for or against people depending on what you're wanting. So let's go ahead and see if I have anything else in range here. I mean, we can take a look at some of the experimental runs, and I don't think they're in range either, though, because the double RFS is a pretty good model, but still in the experimental phase. And then also, where it takes a lot longer to load. We're at 58 hours out of 84, so we're going to be waiting a minute before that gets going. But either way, like I said, this seems like it's going to be a forecast that's going to be very difficult to nail down. Right down to the wire, we may get clarity. And any subtle jumps could make all the difference between how your weekend ends up going. Another thing I want to mention really quickly also is the timing of this system. The timing is going to be probably the most chaotic part in all of this, because when I was looking at this yesterday, there were some models kind of favoring Saturday, and it looks like we can kind of throw that out the window now. It looks like it's going to be an overnight Sunday morning, maybe early Sunday afternoon deal. And either way, it looks like a fast-moving system at that. So by the time we get into the following day, which would be Monday, this system is long gone and probably aren't going to see much of a trace of it, if at all. Still going to be pretty daggone cold after the fact, because you can see these blue lines here. This is the 540 line, or our 32 degree line, and look how far south it is. It's past my city here in Atlanta, so anywhere north of there, it's going to be colder, because the further north you go, the colder it's getting. You can see the numbers dropping with these lines here. I'm not exactly sure which line would be the 0 degree line, but I would imagine it's somewhere around here. We can actually take a look at the temperature map too while we're at it. May as well at this point. So you can see it here, and I actually had it right. So I guess it would be the 498 line maybe, but I'll figure that out later, because those lines are actually equal to pressure. So you multiply those numbers by 10, and that actually is how you get the pressure, by the way, just in case anyone was wondering. But the 540 line is usually the number where you see our freezing line take shape here. And you can see it there. This is our 32 degree line. So it's a little bit more variable on this map, but either way, I mean, you get the picture. It's going to be cold anywhere north of this line here. But it's going to be a cold pattern ultimately as we get into the start of next week. And this is going to pretty much be a continual thing, at least for the next several days after. We start to recover probably by Wednesday heading into Thursday, and then going further beyond that. So definitely something that you want to be prepared for, regardless if you get the wintry stuff or not. I would have called snow something else, but let's not go there. So looking at the pattern in the long range here, and this is where I'm kind of intrigued as well. So I'm staring down this cold pattern here, of course, as we go through the middle of the week. Like I said, we start to level off, and then looks like we get another big cold push here. And it's this setup in yesterday's video that I talked about, where I'm interested in maybe the potential of severe weather towards the Gulf Coast states. Because when I looked at models the other day, we got a nice little pull of moisture to go along with this little warm nose that pops up here. So I'm thinking somewhere between Texas, Louisiana, and maybe the Mississippi Delta could be the point of interest. I really think it's going to be confined to the coastline. And then after this happens, here comes more cold air to match with that. And I think with the way that the setup is, the way the jet stream behaves around this time as well, there could be potential for yet another wintry system to emerge here. Depends on how things kind of pan out, but the cold air looks like it's in place. It definitely looks like there's a trough in play as well. Question is, does the cold air meet up with moisture at all? If we get that interaction, we have something. If it doesn't happen, won't be much of anything to worry about. And then right around the end of the month, we bounce right back. This is kind of playing out a lot like how we discussed the January outlook would go. Right around this time frame, we would see a little bit more action, and then maybe towards the end, we would start to warm back up. But right around the middle to back half of the month, right between this time frame, between I'd say the 17th to the 23rd, it was originally looking like it would be a point of interest, and it looks like things have kind of held up so far. We'll see if this ends up meaning much of anything. I'm still kind of on the fence about what to expect with it, but either way, some early signals that we're looking for. Really now, I'd say we're getting to the point where we're looking at trends. So, quick look at how the troughs are going to be moving about around this time frame here. I'm just going to do the full loop at this point. If it will work, I really hope it does. Alright, so we have some luck here. So here's our trough moving through. This is where the cold air is coming into play. Notice we get a little bit of a warm up here. Here's that next piece of energy. This is where we get our severe potential, and then cold air comes back in. You get two pieces of a trough here too, which intrigues me a bit as well. I'm going to slow this down just a bit so we can see it a little bit more clearly. So obviously, this is where we're going to get our rain tomorrow and into Saturday. Then here's our Sunday setup. That's the storm leaving. After that point, we see a nice little stream of cold air starting to warm back up. And then it's at this point where we have our severe potential. Probably the day before is right here. And then the 24th. This is where things start to get more active once again. One thing I find interesting with this, we do get a cutoff low to develop here. It does lead me to have some questions there as to what to expect for the 28th. And then as we go further beyond that point, you can see things kind of leveling back off to end the month. So like I said, you can compare the model data here between GFS and the Euro at this point. Euro's kind of out of date at this point, so we're going to mainly keep it just strictly GFS for this one. But given the way things are looking right now, I would say that we may not get much of anything out of this. I'm more interested in the Carolinas right now. It's not that I don't care about what's going on towards South Georgia and maybe over towards the Florida Panhandle and southern Alabama. It looks like Alabama might be getting nixed from the equation, because originally this storm track favored parts of central Alabama a bit more. But now we're starting to shift our attention further off towards the east at this point. So my real question for myself is, do I want to do the forbidden taboo here and take a look at snowfall totals? Because I don't want to get anyone's hopes up for a system that may not do what you think it's going to do. Because the thing about this system, it's been making the headlines for a while in the weather community. And I've always been one that's against trying to hype up something that I'm uncertain about for clicks and views. Maybe that's why my channel still is where it is. But if I'm being completely honest, I'd rather do it that way, because at least you know I'm not trying to lead you astray. But what I want to do, I think I'm going to do it this time, only because I'm kind of 50-50 on the confidence. I think we'll see something. Just how significant it'll be, that's the part where I'm kind of on the fence about it. I mean, when you look here, you see somewhere, there's a pocket where you could see about an inch of snow fall possible towards the deep south. Like I said, the further up the east coast you get, the chances are a little bit better. Like I said, I can't really bring myself to have full confidence on it. And then The snowfall totals look like they're a little bit better by the time we get into Sunday night and early Monday morning. Really seems like, again, maybe the East Coast could be the point of interest. If I were to compare this to other models, don't really have a whole lot of confidence. Like I said, I don't really have a whole lot of confidence to work with. And that's one thing that really kind of irks me with this. If I were to go ahead and take a look at some of the global models, you'll kind of see what I'm talking about. So this is me looking at the GFS snowfall totals. These are going to be probably the most aggressive totals I would expect at this point, but considering how the models keep changing, it's pretty hard for me to have a lot of confidence in it. Wow, these are moving slow. Try to see if I can pull a little bit more RAM, and look at that. Yesterday, we were even seeing a stripe towards central Georgia where we had a good chance for action. Looks like we've gone away from that a bit now. In fact, I can actually pull up that model for you. If we were to look around this time yesterday, look at that and compare that to today. Stark difference. We'll do the same thing with the euro as well, since we're in range of that. Like I said, this is today. And this is a little bit more consistent with what we saw with this yesterday. Look at here's what we had yesterday. It's a little bit more aggressive, but not much. Don't understand your system. Is it different from others, or is it you? I don't even understand what your question is, if I'm being completely honest. I'm not sure if it's, are you asking me something about the weather, or are you asking me about my computer? But either way, it looks like we've seen a bit of a downtrend in the action here. So no matter how you look at it, if you're in the southeast, I wouldn't get my hopes up. The map and the explanation. Maybe it's the way I explain it. So I started out talking about the surface low, but that was at the beginning of the stream, and maybe that could have been what threw you off. But simply put, I was talking about where the low ends up developing, how the moisture would interact or wouldn't interact with the cold, and how the models have been trending this. So basically, the GFS had originally been the more aggressive scenario. We've kind of trended more towards the euro, which was the more neutral and kind of more the passive scenario now. So you can see that if there's going to be anything that happens at all towards South Georgia, the euro kind of or there's going to be anything that happens all towards the south, the euro kind of favors far South Georgia. Florida Panhandle looks like they're starting to get nixed. Alabama looks like it's completely nixed from snow. And then we have the Carolinas, which look like they're starting to get nixed now. GFS gives it a better chance. You're going to get snow from an entirely different system in Delphi. Yeah, in Indiana, all your snow looks like it's going to be coming within the next 24 hours. You got this pesky low pressure right here that's really keeping the lake effect machine going. You're getting these little snow bands off and on throughout the day, today and into tomorrow. And you'll see that even a little bit as we go into Saturday. But once the worst of that front passes, you're going to get a little reprieve, and then you're going to get maybe a little bit more snow. I don't expect anything super heavy to come from this, but given the way the pattern looks, you're going to have multiple days where you at least see some snow showers, snow flurries for sure, and then from that point and beyond, it looks like things will eventually start to calm down. But over towards the Ohio Valley and the Midwest, it's going to be a pretty active trend. It's going to be light. It's going to be very light. So if I were to go ahead and take a look at at snowfall ratios for you. It's not a whole lot to really go over. I would expect maybe an inch or two within the next few days here. If I were to go even further along here and take a look at one of my favorite snowfall models here, the totals are even more conservative over the next 2 days. If we go to about 4 days, I would be more concerned about wind than ice. It's going to be too cold for you to get ice because you need warm air aloft, and there's going to be a predominantly cold air mass that's coming into play for you guys. If you were going to have ice, that was really going to be earlier this week and into last week. But yeah, as far as snow totals, an inch, maybe 2 inches for some places further off towards the south, at least heading into the start of this weekend. Heading into next week, kind of going to be the same thing. But yeah, I would be more concerned with the wind over the ice at this point. So let's make sure we know exactly what we're dealing with in regards to wind, since you asked as well. I do think wind chills will be a problem because it is going to get pretty cold over towards this region. In fact, I can actually pull up the wind chill index as well. Ooh, yeah. Do need to be prepared for that because 18-mile-per-hour winds, not the strongest, but when you get those surface temperatures around 10 degrees, 18 miles an hour becomes a lot. And you can see it here throughout a large part of the state. Wind chills could be towards maybe the teens, the 20s. Overnight, they could reach below zero depending on where you are. So you're definitely going to feel a difference. And that's just really putting it lightly. And this is kind of going to be the pattern that we deal with for a while, as I was mentioning before earlier in the stream. We have an active weather pattern where we're going to be seeing a lot of troughing. And the thing is, with those troughs, more cold air is going to be coming in from the north. It's kind of been an unstable pattern that's been setting up throughout the course of the year. Yeah, I don't know who Grant is. I've never seen him on here. If he's someone that his who I've seen on here, or maybe has viewed me, I don't know. I've checked my ban list and I don't really see a Grant on here, at least not that I know of. There are people that we have banned, but hard to say at this point. People come and go on YouTube all the time. It's no problem. Okay, so let me go back to GFS before we wrap this up here. Oh wow, Zero Z's already loading? Well, yeah, it is 10:37. For I really wish we could stay in standard time instead of daylight savings time because it always throws me off during this time of year. Even though I know we still have like another month or two to go before we get to daylight savings time again. But models load a little bit earlier when we're in standard time, so it makes life a little bit easier. I don't like staying up till about 1 or 2 in the morning to try to look at a Zero Z run. I don't know, that's just me, and I'm pretty sure a lot of other people aren't going to be up. In fact, doing this stream at this time of night, I typically don't do this, but I figured that if I was going to do anything tonight, I want to have the most up-to-date data that I can get my hands on. But let's go ahead and take a look at GFS. Alright, so here's what we got going on here. Like I said, these troughs are really just coming in one after another. These are the ones that are going to be affecting your area, Fred. And then this piece of energy right here that's going to be affecting the southeast and maybe even the east coast. So All while this is going on out here towards the west, it's getting warm. So we're definitely in that positive PNA pattern. So that's when things start to usually get pretty wacky for the east. Now, a couple setups that I'm paying close attention to. Of course, it's going to be towards the 23rd to 25th here. Not really sure what the future holds in regards to this setup, but there is a potential for severe weather. I'm interested in how those two pieces of energy kind of end up splitting off after we get past the 25th into the 27th here. Seems like it's going to be another push of cold air. I don't know what to say in regards to how this will end up turning out. I do think this could be another big time storm potentially, just based off of early looks here. If I were to try to match this on the GFS and then do my little magic trick here, what I want to do is I want to pull up the precip map. And it does look like we get a decent amount of snow here, but it doesn't look like it's a huge snow shield. So, at least in the early going... Oh, wait, this is the wrong date. What am I doing? Okay, so... Really, it looks like the winter weather's further out ahead of it. And it kind of makes sense considering the fact that these two pieces of energy are surging here. Yeah, it looks like that snow shield really develops further off towards the east. This kind of has that nor'easter look to it. Surface low kind of becomes more prominent over time. If that were to deepen, that would be a big time nor'easter, but probably gets pulled out to sea if it does. So, either way, from that point, after the 27th and 28th, things do look like they start to calm down. Then from that point, it looks like that's how we're going to end the month. You do have one pesky setup for the 28th that I'm interested in as well. Obviously, once we're at this range, around 290 hours plus, it gets really hard to try to have faith in much of anything. Hello, Seth. Do get another little piece of energy that I'm going to have to keep an eye on as we get towards the 30th. I don't think it's going to mean much of anything. Looks like the cold air is going to be too far to the north. Doesn't look like a setup that yields itself to severe weather potential, so I think that pretty much will sum it up here. Well, if you have any final questions, feel free to shoot, and then I guess we'll call it a stream here. But yeah, as far as southern snow is going, it looks like we're kind of trending in the opposite direction now. I'm not even as certain about the East Coast, even towards the Mid-Atlantic, and maybe even the Delmarva at this, or the Delmarva, or even over towards the Boston area at this point. So, just gonna have to wait and see what tomorrow brings. But anyways, last chances for questions here. Give you like maybe 1 minute before we get offline and call it a night ourselves. I don't know what we'll do tomorrow, depending on what the models end up revealing. We may run this back. You're dry as dirt. So you're here to troll? Bro, come on, man. I appreciate the comment. It's not really helping the algorithm much, but seriously. If you're here to troll, then find something to do, man. Come on. It's not even getting me mad. I'm just, honest, I'm kind of disappointed in you. Anyways, on that note, we're calling it a stream. Appreciate all of you that have tuned in. Appreciate the support, and I'll see you guys later. Everyone take care and have a wonderful rest of your night.